Hey everybody, Dungeon Builder back again with another video. Today we're going to be talking about combat. Now, a lot of people make videos like how to speed up your combat,
how to improve your combat, how to make your combat less boring.
I just want to talk about combat in general with D&D. I mean, when you're signing up to play a TTRPG, part of it is combat. Like, there's role-playing, exploration, and combat. Those are the three pillars, right? And each group is going to vary. Each player is going to vary. Some people are there for the dramatic role-playing. They want to get into their character. They want to have those exciting moments with other players and with NPCs. Some people are there for the exploration. They want to find all the secrets. They want to find all the loot. They want to build the most powerful character, and that's cool too. And then some people are there for the good old hacking and slashing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think combat in D&D is as fun as the whole table makes it. I don't think all the pressure should be on the Dungeon Master, and it shouldn't be on the players. This video is just more about 3 rules to keep in the back of your head when you're about to plan an encounter or run combat in your game. Number 1, will combat make this moment or this session more exciting or more boring? You gotta read the room on this one. If you're having a great session and everybody's role-playing really well, you're exploring, it's just going so flawlessly, and you know that combat, or at least you plan for combat to be a big part of it, you don't have to shoehorn it in, or you can delay it till the next session when it feels more natural. You don't have to just, well, it's been a while since they fought anything, let me roll a random encounter. You don't have to. I can recall some of my best sessions have had 0 combat, and that's great. And then I've also had amazing sessions where the whole thing was combat. It's really just a feel thing. You got to read the room, know your players, and know yourself. Also, that kind of ties in with the type of combat. If they're traveling on a road and you roll random encounter, or you plan for them to run into like 5 bandits, is that encounter going to be exciting, or is it just going to slow everything down and make it boring? What level are your PCs? Are they level 15 and 5 bandits is just going to be like a waste of time? Like, I don't want to fight these things. Or if you throw the 5 bandits out there at your PCs and you can tell, this isn't going very well, it's kind of just bogging the game down, have the bandits try and parlay. Have them, turn it into a role-playing moment. You just got to calculate whether or not that combat is worth it. Because combat, whether we like it or not, does take a lot of time in the game. And that's just a natural part of the game. And I think that's fine, but we just have to embrace it and roll with that game mechanic rather than fight against it. On the reverse side of that, perhaps things aren't moving along. Maybe the player characters or the players are having a tough time coming to a decision. Things are getting stagnant. They're in a room just talking about,
well, maybe we should open the door. Maybe we shouldn't open the door.
That's a great time to interject as the Dungeon Master and have something exciting happen. So all of a sudden, a wandering monster comes in, or the ceiling collapses and 15 kobolds fall in and start slashing at everybody. Those are the moments where you want to interject and bring some action to the table when things are starting to feel dull. So if the mood is high, things are going great. If combat feels appropriate, go for it. But if you think combat's going to slow things down and bring the mood down, maybe hold off. And on the converse, if it's slow and boring, throw a little combat in there to juice things up. Number 2, going along with my first point, what kind of challenge is this? Going back to the example of the bandits, it all depends on where the characters are at. If they're level 1, 5 bandits is going to be a pretty hard challenge. Again, if they're level 15, it's going to be kind of worthless for them to even fight the bandits. So you got to calculate the challenge that it's going to bring to the players and whether or not a challenge is warranted. Sometimes it's good to not have a challenge in combat. You want your players and their characters to feel powerful sometimes, and it kind of shows that level of progression. So when they hit level 15, it can be really entertaining for some low-level enemies to appear out of nowhere and start fighting them, because then they can just use all their special abilities, wipe the floor with them, and that can be rewarding too. But sometimes, you want that challenge. So when they're level 5 party and there's, like a giant that comes out of the hills and starts attacking them, and they get that challenge, that reward of actually defeating something, that's exciting too. You don't want to shortchange your players by making every combat too easy. You want to have a good mix, a good variety of hard, easy, and deadly. Sometimes it's appropriate to throw a deadly combat at your players. Gives them that feeling of, oh, I'm not invincible. My character can go down. This is a dangerous world. That's the kind of game that I enjoy running, is where things feel dangerous, there are consequences, there are stakes. So that all depends on you and what kind of game you like to run, but I do like to throw out challenges that not necessarily impossible, there's pretty much always a way, but that way might be retreating or being a little more clever. And I think that's rewarding for both the Dungeon Master and the players to see how all that rolls out. And then finally, rule number 3, I would say keep combat fluid. For all you Dungeon Masters out there, and something I've had to learn over the years, don't be so hard and rigid with your encounter design. Always leave some wiggle room to keep things interesting. Think of ways that combat can stay fluid, for NPCs to show up or the environment to change. Put things in the environment that the players can interact with that make it more exciting. And another way you can keep things fluid, and this is one of my favorites, is combat that kind of changes halfway through or a few rounds. You can either roll a d4 out publicly, or you can roll it behind your DM screen. But roll a d4 and say it lands on a 2. In 2 rounds, something is going to happen, whether it be the goblins open up a door and release a bunch of hellhounds, or the occultists summon the necrobat from another plane and that thing is going to start attacking the players. It's fun to have a ticking time clock in battles that either the players know or don't know. It is more fun when they're aware of it, because then they have something to be terrified of. Another thing you can do to keep it kind of spicy is, say they're fighting one type of enemy, say they're fighting a bunch of zombies, and then halfway through the fight something else shows up, like a wandering beast in that vicinity, like maybe like a dire bear comes out of its cave, hears all the ruckus and starts attacking. As long as you foreshadow it a little bit, or it makes sense for the setting, that can be really exciting too, to have like something mix it up that's not necessarily a ticking time clock, but it's just environmental. So let me give you a quick example of a combat that I ran recently that I thought was pretty fun for my players. They were headed north to what's called the Shadow Wilds, which is like an untamed region. But on their way there, an NPC asked them to stop into a small town along the river that potentially had not been warned about this oncoming invasion from another realm. A bunch of orcs and goblins invading, you know how they are. So they decided to stop, warn the town, got everybody out of there, but they stayed till the next morning, and a bunch of the orc and goblin warbands came running over a bridge, started attacking the town, killed the mayor. So they're defending the town, making sure that they keep everybody safe. They're just mopping the floor with these orcs and goblins, just having a good old time. I put a lot of enemies in there. When your player characters are high level, you can just throw a ton of enemies at them. I threw like one little goblin mage who like was invisible and snuck behind them and was throwing fireballs. That gave them a little surprise. But I knew that the combat wouldn't be that challenging. It was going to be fun and like a lot of things to kill, and they're defending the town, but it wasn't going to be that hard for them because they were pretty high level. I think they're level 11 at this point. But I knew that this would be a perfect opportunity for the big bad guy of the campaign to make another appearance and harass them a little bit. So while they're in the middle of this fight, I describe how in the middle of the town square, teleporting in out of nowhere, is this archmage wizard who they've already encountered earlier in that they're fighting. Completely threw the combat on its head, so now they're trying to pick off and finish these annoying little goblins and orcs, but they have this grand mage who then started just blasting them with Cone of Cold. He banished one of them to a maze, and it ended up being a pretty wild combat, and actually one of the player characters ended up dying because of the Archmage before they could take him down, and they realized it was not the Archmage himself, it was a clone. So it made for things to be really exciting. It got them more into the overall story of the Archmage, kept that threat alive, while also spicing up what was kind of becoming a mundane encounter. I knew that encounter was going to be a little boring after a few rounds, that they would start to realize, oh, these orcs and goblins aren't really a threat to us, we're just picking them off. But injecting that Archmage made it a lot more exciting. So that's just an example of how you can keep things fluid and spice things up mid-combat. Hope those were helpful. Let me know what you like to do for your combats to keep it interesting, what you keep in the back of your mind when you encounter design. I appreciate you guys watching and hanging out. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Help grow the channel. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.